give you a couple of prison stories. I worked as a correctional officer almost 12 years. I was 21 when I went to work there, and I was 32 when I left, and I went to nursing school. It was, gosh, a chapter in my life that I'm glad is closed. I saw things I probably shouldn't have seen as a 21-year-old young lady. I was married. My husband worked there as well, and we both went to work at the same time. He worked there almost 20 years. Long time. And yeah, the prison we worked at was a really bad prison. It was one of the disciplinary institutions in Georgia, and that's where the ones that had behavioral problems went. We had to go for a training. It was a 1-month training. It was a military style training, and yeah, I didn't really care for the training to be honest with you. But we had to do that before we could go to work. So before we went for the training, though, we had to take a test, and so if we passed the test, we got a call, and then we had to go in and interview. And I interviewed with 2 different people, and I will tell you one thing I'll never forget. They asked me if I would be okay with, and I could handle this. And it was, would I be okay to see an inmate masturbate? Well, yeah, I'm not going to just sit there and, get on some 3D glasses and watch, but I think I can handle that. I don't think it's going to, send me off the deep end, or but that was the question they wanted to know. Now, I don't know what they asked my husband, but I don't know what they asked other people, but that's what they asked me. And I got the job. Yeah. So we go for training, we come back, and it wasn't too long after that there was a riot. Yeah. It was during mass movement, which is usually when things happen. It was during chow time, chow call. That's when they go to eat. And it was an issue between the Hispanics and the blacks. And all I know is I was working in general population, and usually one of the buildings had 2 sides. You had A side and B side, or 1 or 2, whichever. And I was working in C building. I believe I had C2 that day. I was in C building, I do know that. And the other officer I was working with was up in the chow hall. And half of our dorm was up in the chow hall. And yeah, these people want to go by, so they want to blink their lights at me. Okay, but if you're in that big of a hurry, I'm doing 80, so. Alright, but anyway, I was standing out front of the building, and there was probably 300 inmates out in the general population area. They go like a big field. And I was standing out front, and some of these guys was coming out of the chow hall where they eat, and was hollering, "We're gonna win this war. We're taking this effing GD place over," and I'm like, what are they talking about? What is going on? I wasn't ready for something like this. They didn't tell me about it. So, I mean, I knew they could fight and stuff, but they really, yeah. It's just like with any other job. You learn on the job. And so they started running toward C building. There was a sidewalk that comes straight down that all inmates had to go down to go to the other buildings, A, B, or D, it was pretty bad. We had to get control back over the prison, get those folks locked down, try to break up the fights. There was some people got hurt. Yeah, and we had some good supervisors on that shift. It was on second shift. It was like from 2 to 10 was the shift, and this was during supper time. Well, they got that control. I stayed up in that control room. I wasn't about to come down there. Honey. I had 2 babies at home. I had a 9-month-old and a 19-month-old. Lance and Zach were just babies. And I was up there. They finally got control, got everybody locked back down. And I'll never forget this little old young African-American little black guy. Real short. I don't know, he was 5 foot tall. But he went running across that field and he collapsed. He had a shank in the top of his head. Yeah. And that thing stuck out about 4 or 5 inches, it looked like. And I was, far away and I could see it pretty well. He was out there in the grassy part of the field, and they got him, took him to medical, and he probably got the worst end out of all that. And that was scary. That was scary. I can remember going home and crying and saying, I can't work there. I don't know what I've done. And you know what? I talk about that guy in the control room being kind of crazy. I must have been, because I went back to work. I ended up, I went home, I cried, I held my babies. Troy and I always usually worked a different shift, so that we didn't have to have, a babysitter for very long. Yeah, it was tough, but I do remember that. And you're talking about anxiety. It wasn't too long after that, I was on anxiety medicine, Buspar. I was on, God, I don't know, I've took Prozac, Effexor, all of it. Yeah, I just, it was awful. It was awful. But that was, that was hard. I just kept on working there, Troy and I, people say, why did you stay? Well, we had to buy diapers and buy food. We had to rent to pay. And I've always been a worker. And, there's, in the town that I'm from, there's really nothing there unless you don't want to go to work in a mill, which I would have been safer. And but this was a state job. At that time, Georgia had great benefits, great insurance, and, we had 2 babies. And so I stuck it out. I worked there almost 12 years. Yeah. But that was a big eye-opener. Yeah, I'll never forget that. A couple of funny stories that happened there. I had mentioned on one of my videos about trading sex for Little Debbie's. Okay, so there was this inmate, and he had the same name as I did. He was a black guy, and I think he spelled it different. Anyway, I never really had anything to do with this guy. He was in D building, which was a predator dorm, and the women worked there. I don't know how it is now. I know for a while they wouldn't let women even work on the floor, but I worked all over that institution, all over. And from lockdown to GP to like boot camp. Yeah. And so this guy got upset. I had evidently wrote a disciplinary report, a DR they called it, on somebody. And if they wanted to show me, I told you that they asked me if we just laughed. But it was a grievance. It was something to be taken seriously. And at that time, let me tell you, Little Debbie's was about 89 cents a box. Now, we didn't make a whole lot of money there. The benefits were good, but we didn't make a whole lot of money there. But I could afford a box of fudge rounds if I wanted them. And we did buy them. And he had grieved that he and I were having a sexual relationship and that he was giving me Little Debbie's. He was paying me off with Little Debbie's. Well, honey, I learned when I started working there, you better document everything. That's probably why my documentation is really good as a nurse. You better document it all. And I kept a journal, a little log, a little book, notebook of every day. Where I worked, who the OIC, the officer in charge was, who I worked with. Like if I was in a dorm, a building, and there was 2 other people working, I would put their names down. You know, it was just for me, just so I could always go back and say, hey, you know, this and this. And so I kept that journal. One of them people, it's getting daylight. He wants to drive with his lights on bright, I believe. And anyway, I had kept a log of that. So that served me well. The dates he alleged all this was going on, he gave them dates. That's how stupid he was. He gave them dates. Well, we did sometimes 30, 60, and 90-day post rotation. Now, a post is somewhere in the prison where there's a control room, a floor, a tower, the perimeter vehicle, the kitchen, the medical department, the central control, whatever. I was in a tower. On the dates that he made those, that allegedly happened. And I didn't just compare what I had. They also kept record in the supervisory office. And yes, I was in a tower. There was no way. And you know, I thought, now, come on. Nothing would stretch to the tower. I'm just saying. You can figure out what I'm talking about. Oh, no desire ever. Worked there for all those years. I'm sorry, yeah. No relations with those guys. But now there were people that I did work with that fall in love with those guys, yeah. You know, no. I don't care how decent looking or whatever, and we had high profile guys there. We had a guy that played football, I believe, for Alabama. Yeah. I think. I may be wrong about that, but you can look him up. There's videos on him. His name was Joe King. Joe was a nice looking white guy that was probably about 6'8". I'm not kidding. Big old muscular guy. And let me tell you, nobody messed with old Joe. And I can remember thinking that if something ever broke out in the dorm that Joe lived in, and I had to go hide somewhere, I'd probably try to run to his room. If, you know, as opposed to any of the other guys, because nobody messed with Joe. And he didn't mess with nobody. Joe was in there for drugs, and he would walk around with his Bible in his hand and his earplugs in. He didn't want to hear all that noise in there. Never bothered nobody. Was a role model. And he would actually talk to the juvenile delinquents they would bring up there every week and try to deter them from, you know, taking the wrong road, and ended up in prison. But you know, he was still an inmate. But you need to look him up. Joe King. Joe ended up, I believe, going to federal prison after he did state time, and then he got out. And he got back drinking, had a wreck, became a quadriplegic. And the videos that I've seen on YouTube with him, he had a tracheostomy. He was a quad, but he died. like, to go in his room if something were to break out. I would have felt probably a little safer. I don't think he would have did anything. They say never trust any of those guys. Well, you got to pick and choose your battles, But anyway, that was one of the funny stories, was the sex and the little babies. And there was another guy there from the Middle East. I think he was from Iran. And I worked in the special management unit, the lockdown unit, for a little while. That's where they're locked down 23 hours a day. They get an hour out on the yard, or cage, basically. And we had this little guy in there, and most of the officers had problems with him. I never did. I never bothered him. And I would talk to him, and he would talk to me, And I just thought he was hilarious. But he would get in there, and he would mix his poop with mustard and write Saddam Hussein's name on the wall of his cell. Oh man, yeah. And I'd say, hey, good artwork. The wall looks better. He would just laugh. I never had problems out of him, but some of them did. I can remember one time he had put it all over his cell and all over the cell. So our certified emergency response team, the CERT team, they would go in there. They took the water hose and literally just hosed him in that room down. He had poop and mustard everywhere. Oh my gosh. But never had a problem out of him. Yeah. We had a guy there, and I don't remember his name, but he was a tall, slim, he was a black gentleman. Never bothered nobody. Very quiet. Very quiet. And he was obsessed with cleanliness. And I am too, but I'm not like this. He would go out. They had a smoking area. They could smoke. That was attached to the dormitory, where they could go out, had a little ashtray on the wall where they could go out and smoke. And he would go out there and clean the bricks. He would wash the bricks down. He was tall, so as far up as he could reach, he was cleaning them bricks. Obsessed. His room, my goodness, you could see yourself in the floor. He kept it waxed and buffed, and very particular. Well, he was obsessed with working out. He would just go down and do 100 push-ups. He was a little skinny guy. He really wasn't muscular, but he was obsessed with his eating. He was obsessed with, trying to eat certain things and not eating some of that stuff they fed. Well, I found out he was in for necrophilia. And I didn't know what that was. I had to look it up. That's where you have sex with dead bodies. Come to find out, he had killed these two little old ladies. I believe they were in their 80s. They were on up there. And had kept them for several weeks and had his way. Yeah. And that was weird. That was really weird. That was really, really weird. But just his obsessiveness over cleanliness and health, and he would do that. I don't know. Mental health. I got locked in a cell one time with a mental health inmate, a little bitty short guy, and I worked with female officers. I wasn't the only female officer, and so I always knew, though, I was a lady. been stuff they could have, but when it was when they had an excessive amount, it was then considered contraband. So we go in this cell. She wanted to go in this cell, and this was a bad dorm. This is where a lot of the bad guys were. It was in E2. And she wanted to go in and shake down this little guy's cell. So I go in with her, because, you know, you should have somebody with you when you're doing that. And this little guy was mental health, through and through. I mean, he was really bad. Well, she started yakking and going through his stuff. Well, I'm in there going through the other locker box, because it's 2 to a cell. I don't know where the other inmate was, but so him and her get into it. Well, honey, he shuts the door. He backs her up against the wall. They had a little window, and they had their little heater. It was in the wall heater. And he had to look up to her, because he was a little bitty short fella. And I could tell she was scared. Well, you should have been, you big dummy. You don't go in there in their rooms and start stuff with them and start cussing them and calling them this and that. And I knew that it was getting serious. So when those doors are shut and they're not on access, which means they can't get out, normally we would take them off of what they call access, so they couldn't come out of their rooms. Well, that's what that door was. And normally we would tell the control officer to take it off access, so that if something like that did happen, we would be able to get out. But we didn't that day. I don't know why, but we didn't, and we couldn't get out. I couldn't get out. I was pushing that little button. So when you push that button, it beeps in the control room, so that the guy or lady up there can open the door. And we had a guy that liked to sleep in the control room. Oh yeah, he was notorious for that. And I kept pushing, and him and her kept. I mean, she stopped some of that old yakking and talking down to him, but he was letting her have it. And I just knew it was going to get bad. And finally, after beating on that door, somebody come by, one of the inmates come by and said, "Officer trying to get out." And that woke up the control room guy, and he pushed the button and let us out. And I let her have it. I said, "Don't you ever ask me to go in a cell with you again. You don't go in there and do that mess. You don't go in there and start stuff with those guys. They've got nothing to lose." That little guy probably had 3 life sentences. Well, what's going to happen to him? Coffee's gone. All right, I'm away. But yeah, that was a lesson learned. I never did like working with her after that. But she ended up marrying one of the lieutenants, so she didn't really have to work on the floors. She got the cushier jobs. So yeah, those are some of my experiences as a prison guard, a correctional officer. So, you know, some of those folks, and probably they still do, I don't know, but they did not like to be called a prison guard. What else are you? I'm a correctional officer. Okay, you're still a prison guard. Don't bother me. Call me either, or then. I'm not that now, of course. But prison's not a good place, and Georgia is not a nice place to go to prison. You know, it's no luxuries there. Yeah. And it's bad. It's really bad. In the male prisons, they have gangs. We have the Gangster Disciples, the Crips, the Bloods, the Mexican Mafia, the MS-13s, Ghostface, all different types. And but in women's prisons, my understanding, they have families. And you got all these women, and they play the role of the father, the mother, the grandpa, the granny, the uncle, the aunt, the cuz. And I'd probably be more afraid to work in a women's prison than a man. I'd work in a men's prison. Even now, I would. I ain't gonna want to work in a women. Women are allegedly the women would take those hot dogs and rape each other with them. Yeah. Very sad. No desire to work in a women's prison, but it's all bad. It's not a nice place to be. I hope, pray you or your family never experience that. I think it's bad enough working there. The only good thing was I could leave, and a lot of those guys were LWOP, life without parole. They wasn't in there for singing too loud in church, I can tell you that. We had folks in there that had killed mama and buried her under the front porch. We had folks in there kill their spouse, folks in there that would molest their own children, rape their own children, rob places, drugs, definitely. But I've got more stories. Yeah, I don't want to bore you or anything, but yeah, those are just some of my old chain gang stories. So maybe you found it to be entertaining, and so I hope you have a good day today. Remember, you're responsible for your own happiness. So, you know, be around people that lift you up, get your little music going, and